My name is Nora Callum. I'm 31 years old, and the week my grandfather was buried, my brother Danny had already shaken hands with a developer named Gerald Pruitt over 112 acres of farmland that Grandpa Earl spent 53 years building from nothing. The handshake happened on a Thursday. The funeral was on Saturday. I didn't know about either until 9 days later, when a man I'd never met knocked on the door of Grandpa's farmhouse, the one I was still sleeping in because I hadn't been able to make myself leave yet, and introduced himself as Gerald Pruitt's site assessor. He had a clipboard. He was measuring the front porch. Before I tell you what I did next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city below and the time where you are. I love knowing who's out there listening. Now let me take you back, because this story starts a long time before Gerald Pruitt's man showed up on that porch. Clearwater Farm sits on the eastern edge of Boone County. It's not beautiful the way postcards are beautiful. It's flat in most places, the soil dark and heavy after rain, the kind of land that asks something of you every single day. There's a wood line along the north edge where the deer come out at dusk, a creek that runs through the lower 40 that floods maybe once every few years and takes part of the fence with it when it does. A red barn that my grandfather painted himself every third summer, right up until he couldn't climb a ladder anymore. The farmhouse is white, 2 stories, a porch that wraps around the front and half the south side. Grandpa Earl built that porch addition himself in 1987. He told me once it took him all of one summer and 2 extra weeks he hadn't planned on. Everything worth building takes longer than you think, he said. That's how you know it's worth something. I was maybe 10 when he said that. I didn't write it down. I didn't need to. My grandfather was the kind of man who was up before the sun and didn't stop until dark, and even then he'd sit on that porch with a cup of coffee and go over the next day in his head before he let himself sleep. He wasn't a soft man. He wasn't the type to say I love you over breakfast, but he showed you, with the extra seed he saved when yours flooded out, with the tractor he lent before you thought to ask, with the way he remembered every detail you ever told him, and brought it back up months later like he'd been thinking about it the whole time. He had 2 children, my father, Robert, who died when I was 11, and my uncle, Danny Sr., who lives in Phoenix and hasn't set foot in Boone County in years. Then there's my generation, me and my cousin Danny Jr., we just call him Danny, who is Uncle Danny Sr.'s son. Danny's 34. He works in commercial real estate in Columbus. He drives a black Audi. He comes home for Christmas when it's convenient, and sometimes it isn't convenient. I'm the one who stayed. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. After my dad died, Grandpa Earl became the fixed point in my life. I spent every summer at Clearwater from age 12 on. I learned to drive on his fields. I learned that you plant soybeans when the soil temperature hits 50 degrees and not a day before. I learned which parts of the lower fence are soft after winter and need checking before you trust them with cattle. I was there the summer the north barn roof came down in a hailstorm, and we spent 3 weeks replacing it. I was there the winter the creek flooded, and we spent 2 nights moving equipment to higher ground in the dark. I was there every time it mattered. Danny was not. I'm not saying that with bitterness. I'm saying it because it becomes the whole story. Grandpa Earl's health started sliding about 2 years ago. His knees had been bad for years. Decades of kneeling in soil will do that. But in his late 70s, it stopped being just the knees. His heart, his memory, some days better than others. He still got up early, still sat on the porch with his coffee, but the farm work had shifted more and more to the 2 hands he kept on payroll, Ray and his son Cody, who'd been working Clearwater for over 20 years. I drove out every 2 weeks, sometimes more. I'd stay the weekend, help with whatever needed doing, sit with him in the evenings. He'd didn't always talk much. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch, watching the woodline, and he'd tell me something about the farm. Something he'd noticed. Something he was thinking about. One evening in early spring, about 8 months before he passed, he said something that I didn't understand right away. "Nora." He was looking at the barn, not at me. "Yeah, Grandpa. You know where everything is, don't you?" It wasn't exactly a question. I said, "I know the farm." He nodded slowly. "Not just the farm." He didn't say anything else. I thought he was tired. I let it go. I've thought about that moment probably 100 times since. Grandpa Earl passed in October, quietly, the way he did everything that didn't require noise. He'd had a bad week, and then one morning he just didn't wake up. The hospice nurse called me at 5:43 in the morning. I was in my car by 5:50. I got there before Danny did. Danny arrived 4 hours later, having driven from Columbus. He hugged me in the driveway. He smelled like cologne, and he was wearing a jacket that wasn't right for the weather. He was a good man, Danny said. I said, he was, and I watched Danny look at the farmhouse, just for a moment. A quick scan, the way you'd assess something you were thinking about. Then he looked back at me and said, "You okay?" I said I was fine. I wasn't paying close enough attention yet. The week of the funeral was a blur, the way those weeks always are. Neighbors coming by, phone calls, flowers that pile up faster than you know what to do with them. Ray and Cody kept the farm running without being asked, the way they always did, the way Grandpa had trained them to. I handled the arrangements, the obituary, the calls to people on Grandpa's handwritten contact list that he kept in the drawer by the kitchen phone. Old-fashioned, but complete. Danny stayed for 4 days. He was helpful, genuinely. He's not a monster. He carried things, greeted people, told stories about Grandpa at the reception that made people laugh. He gave a good eulogy. I remember thinking, he loved Grandpa in his way. He just also loves money in a way that doesn't always make room for other things. The night after the funeral, we sat at the kitchen table together. Danny poured 2 glasses of bourbon, slid one to me. "We should talk about the farm at some point," he said. "Not that night," I told him. "Not this week." He nodded. "Of course. Whenever you're ready." He drove back to Columbus 2 days later, waved from the Audi, told me to call if I needed anything. I told him I would. 9 days after the funeral, there was a man on the porch with a clipboard. I opened the door, and he introduced himself. Site assessor, Pruitt Land Development. Said he was there to do a preliminary survey of the property. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. He looked at his clipboard, said he had a signed purchase agreement between Gerald Pruitt and Daniel Callum for 112 acres, and that the agreement included a survey access clause. I said, "What purchase agreement?" He showed me his copy. Danny's signature was at the bottom. The date was 4 days before the funeral. 4 days before we buried my grandfather, Danny had signed a purchase agreement to sell Clearwater Farm to a developer named Gerald Pruitt for $840,000. I stood on that porch and read the document twice. The man with the clipboard waited. I told him to leave the property. He started to explain the access clause again, and I said it one more time, quiet and flat, the way Grandpa used to say things when he meant them. "Leave the property." He left. I called Danny before his car was off the gravel lane. He answered on the first ring. "Nora, you signed a purchase agreement." A pause, shorter than it should have been, like he'd been expecting this. "I was going to tell you. I wanted to wait until after everything settled down. Danny, Grandpa has been in the ground for 9 days. I know, and I know this isn't great timing. It's not about the timing. I was standing in the kitchen. I didn't remember walking there. You don't own this farm. Grandpa hasn't even been through probate. You can't sign a purchase agreement on a property that isn't yours. I'm his grandson. I'm next of kin, with your dad gone. So am I. It's a complicated legal situation, he said. I talked to an attorney. As next of kin, I have standing to. What attorney? He named someone in Columbus, a real estate attorney he used in his work. Did that attorney see the will? I said. Another pause, longer this time. There's a will? And right there, right in that pause, I understood something. Danny didn't know about the will. Let me tell you about the will. 6 months before Grandpa Earl passed, he asked me to drive him to town. Not unusual. I'd been driving him to appointments for over a year by then. But this time, he directed me to a law office on the second floor of a building on Clement Street that I'd never been to. Earl Callum, he told the receptionist. She smiled like she knew him. The attorney's name was James Whitfield. He was maybe 55, unhurried, the kind of man who kept his desk clear and spoke slowly on purpose. He shook my hand and then looked at my grandfather. Grandpa looked at me. She already knows everything I'm going to say. Might as well hear it official. We sat across from James Whitfield, and Grandpa Earl laid it out. The farm went to me. All of it. The land, the equipment, the farmhouse, the 2 outbuildings. To Nora Elizabeth Callum, sole and outright. Not split, not divided. To me. He also left Danny a sum of money, a savings account he built separately, about $60,000. Generous, considered. Danny wasn't cut out. He was just given his portion in cash, not land, because these are Grandpa's exact words, which James Whitfield wrote down. Danny never learned that land isn't just money you haven't spent yet. James Whitfield prepared the will. It was signed, witnessed by 2 people I didn't know, employees of the firm, notarized, filed. On the drive home, Grandpa was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You're not surprised?" I said, "That you're leaving it to me? That I'm not leaving it to both of you?" I thought about it. "No, I'm not surprised." He nodded, looked out the passenger window at the fields going by. "Danny's a good boy," he said. "He's just not a farmer." That was the end of the conversation. After I hung up with Danny that morning, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. He hadn't seen the will. His attorney in Columbus hadn't seen it either, or they would have stopped him before he signed anything. He'd assumed, the way people who want something always assume, that the path was clear. It wasn't clear. It never was. I went upstairs to Grandpa's bedroom, the closet. On the top shelf, behind a box of old seed catalogs and a folded wool blanket, was a manila envelope. My name on the front in Grandpa's handwriting. Inside, a copy of the will, a business card for James Whitfield, and a single index card with Grandpa's handwriting on it. If someone comes to that door before you're ready, call James. He's been waiting. He knew someone would come to that door. He planned for it. I sat on the edge of his bed and held that index card, and I breathed. Then, I picked up my phone and called James Whitfield. He answered like he'd been expecting me. "Miss Callum, I've been wondering when you'd call." I told him what happened, the site assessor, the purchase agreement, Danny's signature, the date. James Whitfield listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "The purchase agreement is unenforceable because of the will. The will supersedes any assumed inheritance claim. Danny had no legal authority to enter into a purchase agreement for property he does not own. The will was properly executed, witnessed, and filed. Clearwater Farm belongs to you." I said, "What about Pruitt Development? They have a signed document." "They have a document signed by someone who had no authority to sign it. Their recourse is against Danny, not against the estate, and not against you. I'd expect them to pursue him for breach of contract once this is clear." He paused. "I'll contact Danny's attorney today and provide a copy of the will, and I'll send a formal notice to Pruitt Development that the property is not available for sale and that the purchase agreement is void." I said, "Danny's going to push back." "He can try, but the will is airtight, Miss Callum. Your grandfather was very thorough." I looked around Grandpa's bedroom. the dresser with the small mirror, the old quilt folded at the foot of the bed, the window that looked out over the south field. He always was, I said. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Has anyone ever set something up for you quietly, without explaining why, and only later did you understand exactly what they were protecting you from? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, stay with me, because Danny did not take this quietly. I was on the porch. The sun was going down behind the wood line, that low orange light that Grandpa used to call the farm's best hour. My coffee was getting cold. "Danny," I answered. His voice was different, not the smooth, reasonable tone from this morning. Stripped of it. "You knew about the will the whole time." I said, "Yes, and you didn't tell me." "Grandpa asked me not to. That was his choice to make. He left you everything, Nora. Not angry. Worse, quiet. Like someone standing at the edge of something. 112 acres. The house. Everything he built. He left you $60,000, Danny. That farm is worth close to $1 million. I know what it's worth. You were out here every weekend playing farmer while I was building an actual career, and now you get... Danny, I kept my voice even. I was out here because I wanted to be, not because I was angling for something. I didn't know what was in the will until 6 months ago. He asked me to. Silence. The kind that has weight to it. "I signed that agreement in good faith," he said finally. "I know you did, but good faith doesn't create ownership. James Whitfield is sending you a copy of the will tonight. Read it. And please talk to your attorney before you do anything else." He hung up. No goodbye. I sat on the porch until it was fully dark. The fireflies were out in the field, blinking low over the soybeans. Somewhere in the wood line, something rustled and went quiet. I thought about Grandpa sitting in this exact chair, watching this exact dark. I thought about him saying, "You know where everything is, don't you? Not just the farm, the will, the business card, the index card." He'd hidden the map for me, quietly, without making it a thing, because that was how he did everything. The next 2 weeks moved fast. James Whitfield sent formal notice to Pruitt Development. Their attorney responded within 48 hours, professional, cold, already pivoting. They weren't interested in a legal fight over a property they had no valid claim to. Their dispute was with Danny, and they made that clear quickly. The purchase agreement was declared void. Pruitt Development filed a breach of contract claim against Danny for their costs. The site assessor, the attorney fees, the survey preparation. The total damages they sought were just over $22,000. Danny hired a probate attorney to contest the will. I wasn't surprised. I would have been surprised if he hadn't. The grounds he filed were the standard ones people use when they don't have better options. Lack of testamentary capacity, undue influence. Essentially arguing that Grandpa Earl either didn't know what he was signing or that I had manipulated him into leaving me the farm. James Whitfield told me, calmly, that this was unlikely to go anywhere. "Your grandfather was examined by his physician 4 months before the will was signed and given a clean cognitive evaluation. We have that on record. There were 2 neutral witnesses with no relationship to either party. And frankly," he paused, "your grandfather was not a man who was easily influenced by anyone." I almost smiled at that. "He'll spend money fighting it," James said. "But I don't believe he'll win." He didn't. The contest was dismissed 4 months later. The judge's ruling was brief. The will was valid, properly executed, no evidence of incapacity or undue influence. Danny's attorney filed a 1-page withdrawal of the claim. No drama. Just paperwork that ended something that should never have started. Pruitt Development settled with Danny out of court. I don't know the exact amount. I didn't ask. Danny and I haven't spoken since that phone call on the porch. His choice, not mine. I sent him a message after the ruling. "Just, I know this isn't what you wanted. Grandpa loved you. So do I. The door's open if you want to talk. He read it. No response. Maybe someday. Maybe not. I think about what Grandpa said in the car that day. Danny's a good boy. He's just not a farmer. He didn't say it with contempt. He said it the way you'd say the sky is blue. Just an observation. Just the truth of the thing. He knew his grandson. He knew both of us. And he made his decision with clear eyes. That's the part that still gets me sometimes. Not that he left it to me. That he thought it through so carefully. That he went to James Whitfield's office at 78 years old, in his good jacket, and sat across from an attorney, and said exactly what he wanted and why, and then came home and made the index card and put it on the shelf and never mentioned it again. Like it was just one more thing on the list. Like he was planting something and trusting the season to do the rest. It's spring now. Ray and Cody are in the south field this morning. I can hear the tractor from the porch. The soil is dark from the rain last week. Good planting soil. Heavy and rich, the way Grandpa always said it should be. I had the barn repainted last month. Same red. Same shade he always used. Cody helped me pick the paint. He stood in the hardware store holding 2 color chips up to the light for a long time, and then said, "That one. That's the right one." He was right. The porch needs some work on the south end. 2 boards that have gone soft over winter. I've been putting it off, but it needs doing before summer. Grandpa would have had it fixed already. I know that. I found something last week, going through the last of the boxes in the spare bedroom. A notebook. Grandpa's handwriting. Pages and pages of farm records, going back 30 years. Yields, weather, what worked and what didn't. Observations written in that spare, careful way he had. On the last page, dated about a year before he passed, there was one line that had nothing to do with farming. The right person will know what to do with all of this. She already does. I sat on the floor of that spare bedroom for a long time. Then I put the notebook in the desk drawer. The same drawer where he kept his contact list. Where things get kept when they matter. I'm going to say something to you before I go. If you're the one in your family who shows up, who drives to the appointments, who learns which fence needs checking after winter, who stays when it would be easier to leave, I want you to hear this. It doesn't always get acknowledged. It doesn't always get said out loud. The people who see it most clearly are sometimes the quietest about it. But they see it. And sometimes, in the most important ways, they make sure it counts. That's my story. If it made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, who in your life showed up quietly without needing credit for it? I read every single one.